This is the story of MacCodram and his seal wife. There was once a king and a queen who lived in the depths of the sea, and they had beautiful children, of course. Beautiful, straight, tall children with lovely brown eyes who used to swim about at the bottom of the sea. And the king and queen were particularly happy and particularly proud of their children. Unfortunately, one day the queen became unwell, and a short while afterwards she died. The king did what he could to maintain the children, but he noticed after a while that they became unkempt and neglected looking. Particularly their hair, it was long, normally long and straight and glossy, and it was all tangled and in knots. So he felt that the children needed a new mother to look after them. He looked around to see who he could marry, and he found a witch who lived in the forest beneath the sea. He thought, maybe she would be an appropriate wife to look after his children. She, of course, was absolutely delighted that she was going to be the queen of this vast ocean dominion. She didn't care very much about the kids, and they didn't care very much about her. In fact, as time went on, she began to become increasingly jealous of the children and how beautiful they looked, and how elegant they were, and how much their father loved them. They were just so tall and so straight and so elegant, and finally she couldn't take it any longer. She got these herbs and plants that she'd found underneath the sea and made a potion. She tricked them into drinking the potion, and then she cast a binding spell on them. From that moment, they ceased to be long, tall children and became small, squidgy, podgy seals who were able to swim under the sea at will. The king was very distressed to see them swimming off. They no longer had the same allegiance to him. The one thing about the spell was that on one and only one day of the year, from sunrise to sunset, they could come inshore, and they could take off their seal pelts and become normal children again. Straight, tall, beautiful children with beautiful brown eyes. And they would sing and play on the beach and have lots of fun, but as the sunset approached, they had to put on their pelts again, go back into the sea, and that was them for the whole of the next year. And of all the places throughout Europe and of the West, throughout Europe, the west of Scotland and Ireland, where seals like to play and to swim, the Western Isles have always been a favourite spot, in particular a part between Harris and North Uist. And that is at the north-west of Scotland in the Outer Hebrides, a place called the Sand of Harris. And there's a small island there called Berenice in between those two islands. On one day, a fellow called MacCodram, a local man, a fisherman, was walking along the shore, as he often did, and he heard voices, beautiful, sweet voices. There was kind of a sandbank that was blocking his view from part of the beach. He climbed onto to the top of the sandbank and looked down, and what did he see but lovely, elegant, tall, gorgeous people playing and laughing and singing. This had been a long time by now that they'd been seals, and the children had grown into adults. He was conscious. Well, he knew that if they saw him, that they would flee immediately back into the sea, and he would never see them again. He was just about to go home when he saw a pile of seal skin pelts, one on top of the other, by the shore. And he thought to himself, well, he was a bachelor, and he was getting on in years, and he still hadn't found the woman he'd been searching for, and he was wondering if he ever would. He thought to himself, he looked at the adults playing on the beach, he looked at the pelts. He couldn't resist touching and looking through them, and they were all very soft, and different kinds of a brown colour, a rusty brown, a reddish brown colour, but there was one in particular. It was beautiful golden honey. Without thinking too much about it, really, he picked it up And he ran, and when he got home he went into the house and he thought, well, I've got to put this somewhere. And he stretched it up and found a hiding place. It's just above the doorway on a lintel, a little piece of wood jutting out, and he kind of tucked it up there where it wouldn't be seen. And then he sat down and started to mend some nets and do some other things that he had to do. And he waited for quite a bit of time, and when the sun had gone down, maybe an hour or so afterwards, he began to hear this kind of wailing sound. He opened the door, and there was this beautiful woman outside, and she looked in distress. He said, "What's wrong?" She says, "Well, I'm from the sea, I'm a seal, I'm a sulky woman," she says. "I was playing with my brothers and sisters on the beach, and when I went to put on my sealskin, it wasn't there. I must have lost it, or something must have happened. Can you help me? Can you help me find it?" Now the man knew fine well he could help her find it. All he had to do was fetch the sealskin from the lintel, take it down, give it to her, and she could reverse her sorry state and return to the sea. But he looked at her. She was absolutely beautiful. He thought of his own situation, and he said, I don't know what could possibly have happened to your sealskin. Someone must have come across it and for some reason taking it. It was a beautiful sealskin," she said. "Yes," he says, "I'm sorry this has happened for you. But you, if you were willing to stay with me, if you were willing to come into my house and be my wife, and I would be a very caring, loving husband for you, and I'll look after you and make sure that you want for nothing." And she looked at him and thought about her plight, and she thought, well, I'm never going to be able to go back to the sea, and he seems quite a nice man. I'll take him up on his offer. So she did, and although he'd stolen his sealskin, he was true to his word. He was an honourable husband, and he looked after her, and she didn't want for anything. Of course he was a fisherman, and he went out and fished all day and brought home fish for their dinner. Over the years they were blessed with children, a good number of children, and the children grew up. But on this one particular morning he was headed out fishing, and a hare crossed by him. Now, there are lots of fishing taboos, and that's one of them. If you see a hare and you're about to go out on the sea, then that is an inauspicious sign. But he looked at the sky. He could see clouds were beginning to gather, but he thought, well, I'm a very experienced fisherman. I've been out lots of times in my boats, and the elements have expressed their anger towards me, but they've never sunk me yet. So he continued on. He went out fishing, and by the time he got about a mile offshore, the waves were picking up. A fierce storm was coming. The same storm was battering the house at home. The wife was inside with the kids. The younger ones, that is. The older one was out on the shore. He loved the sea about as much as his father did. So he was down at the shore, and he was looking out at the waves, and she was looking after the kids, and the fisherman was out in his boat, and she was worried. She was worried about her fisherman husband, and she was worried at Rory, her oldest son, down by the shore. So she leaves the younger children for a second and runs out of the door of the house, and she shouts, "Rory! Rory, come home, Rory!" She calls once, she calls twice. She can see him in the distance by the shore, but she can see, because of the wind rushing around him, that Rory can't hear her. Then, fortunately, on the third or fourth call, he turns, and she can see that he is heading home. She goes back in and leaves the door open for him so he can get inside quickly. Well, when Rory comes home, you'd think he'd been hurled through the door by the wind, that he's not in control at all of how fast he's moving, and the storm just throws him in and slams the door behind him. And of course, what falls off the lintel above the door? Well, it's the sealskin. She just looks down in amazement. She sits and picks it up and runs her fingers through its soft fur. She turns to the children and she says just one word: "Farewell." She takes the sealskin, goes out through the door, down to the beach. She takes off her human clothes and puts on her sealskin, and slips into the water. That night when he came home, the fisherman, he had a great struggle getting his boat in. He caught very little fish. He thought he was a goner. He thought he wouldn't make it back. And he managed to drag himself to shore, light a lamp, and use the light of the lamp to make his way home. When he got to the home, the door was open. It was flapping backwards and forwards. And when he went in and shut it behind him, he saw in the lamplight his children sitting there, sadly. No fire for them, no dinner. He knew immediately what had happened. She'd gone back to the sea. And the children, although they missed her mother greatly, they did remember her kindness and her love. And for that day forth they were kind to the needs of seals. And still, to this day, the MacCodram clan and all of their descendants have been particularly kind to the seals.